Well, since it's a pretty nasty, dusty, windy day out here in the desert Southwest, I figured it'd be a good time to go over the Thetford cassette toilet and tank. Some of the things I do to maintain this thing, keep it clean, and some of the issues that I've had with this. And while I'm at it, I'll break this thing down and apart so you all can see how it works. Now, these are all things that I do. You don't have to do them. I've learned some things from the few little videos that are on YouTube and some of the forums about this thing. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot out there, and there probably should be, because these are pretty popular in the European caravan scene. So we're going to go over all that. A little while back, I had made a video about going to the actual dump station, and it's in my tabcation video if you want to watch me dumping at an actual dump station. I think the video is labeled From the Dump Station to Camp 3. The other video I made got pretty popular, and that was how I stealth dump my cassette. Stealth. And that video was meant to be kind of a joke to take the seriousness out of dumping your poo and pee at a pit house. And we're going to go over a lot of that too, but I don't want to hear any crap about how I deal with my crap. But this is how I do things. This is how I've learned. There's not a whole lot out there. You can do whatever you want to do, but hopefully this might be kind of helpful or give everybody a little bit of insight on this thing. And in that video where I stealth dumped my cassette tank at a pit toilet, I got a little heat about not wearing any gloves. Well, one reason for that was if I were wearing gloves taking my poo suitcase here down to the pit house, it wouldn't have been stealth. I think that would have been pretty obvious. But yes, normally I do wear gloves, especially at a dump station and when I'm cleaning this out, because it's pretty gross. And when you're at a dump station, you never know what the last person has done before you got to that dump station. I've seen some pretty gross stuff. Apparently somebody didn't dump their stinky slinky all the way out before they pulled it out of the hole. It was pretty bad. You're touching a lot of nasty stuff there that isn't yours, so yes, definitely wear gloves. The second reason I wasn't wearing gloves is I keep this thing extremely clean and sanitized after every time I maintenance it or go and dump it. There really shouldn't be any reason to have any kind of bacteria or anything gross or excrement on this thing unless you did something wrong in these steps. Plus, the benefit of keeping this thing sanitized is if I forget my lagoon table at home, I have a nice tray table to eat my lunch. And I wasn't kidding. Tastes a little nutty. Jokes everybody. Don't take that too seriously. If you've ever seen the movie Joe Dirt where he's eating french fries off of a meteor that came out of the sky, then you'll know where I got that spoof from. I would never really do that on a used cassette. But this is a brand new cassette, and I'm going to go over why I have an entire brand new cassette here in a minute. In that stealth dumping video, I did have a few people that were a little upset I didn't lift the toilet seat. Now, I normally would lift the toilet seat, but in this case, I didn't want to put that on video. Trust me, it was pretty bad. I didn't even want to touch it. It was that bad. A lot of these campgrounds are extremely neglected at times. This one, in particular, had been left to a host that did absolutely nothing. And being used to dumping at a dump station and putting this 2 or 3 inch spout in a 4 or 5 inch dump station hole, my aim is absolutely spectacular. Trust me, I'm not even joking. So there was no worry in even making it a mess. Even if I did, of course, I would clean that up. But if you dump your cassette right and you do the process correctly, you shouldn't spill a single drop on anything, especially as something as large as a 10 inch or 8 inch toilet seat hole or whatever it is. That's pretty hard to miss. I did have some comments of people saying you're not supposed to dump a cassette in a pit toilet. Well, that's all I've been told, is you dump it in a pit toilet or you go to the dump station. Now, that being said, I did ask a couple campground hosts so far, and they said they have no problem with it as long as it's a small cassette. And it's probably a good idea to make sure the treatment you're using is septic safe, because that pit toilet is just a giant holding tank, or basically a septic tank that gets sucked out. So, in theory, you're only moving your waste from your trailer to the toilet. There's no difference if you use that pit house or if you used your cassette toilet and then dumped it in a pit house. It's still the same amount of waste plus a little bit of water with a little bit of added enzyme treatment, which will probably make the job of the people that come to suck that pit house out even easier, because it's going to help break down the solids and waste in that pit house. But you should make sure that you're using a septic safe tank treatment at least. Now, as far as a composting pit house goes, you probably don't want to dump in that if it's only a solids only, but I'm not entirely sure, so I don't dump in those if I come across those, of course. But you do whatever you got to do. This is what I've done, how I know to do it, what I've been told was okay and what wasn't. And I'm still learning, so we'll see what happens along the way. And if I find anything new out, I'll let everybody know. Now that all that's been said and out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into this cassette tank. All right, let's go over a how to dump situation here. You need to develop a routine with this thing to make sure that you don't have any catastrophic events. So the first thing I like to do is I'm going to pull the lever on that toilet and make sure all the water in the toilet is in here, or else it's going to be all stuck in here and it may overflow out on top of this when you pull the cassette out. You also need to make sure, even though this should be in the right direction, that your valve is completely closed and locked. Do not ever hit this button until you're at an angle about like this, because if you hit this on this angle, all that nasty stuff in there is going to come right out of that vent hole. Don't ever do that. When I grab this, I slide it out, I grab the front pull out a little bit, stick my hand under this handle and back here. I grab it and pull it out. Now, what I practiced a few times with just water was how to get my angles right so I don't spill this thing. And I'll roll this dump nozzle or whatever it is out to about here. Make sure I have a good hold on this. While it's flat on the ground, I can undo my cap. Then you can take this upright very carefully. Make sure you have a good handhold right here. Don't press your button. And you're going to dump it. But the trick is getting used to knowing how far you want this angled, especially when at a dump station, because that hole is only about that big. So I take it to about right here. And I'm right-handed, so this is how I do it. I take it this way, and that way the cassette is up here on an upper angle, and you can get this pretty close to that dump hole. But don't go beyond that, or else this will pop out. So when you're dumping, you're already on that angle, and the water hasn't even hit it, and now you're already in the dump hole. And now you can start turning, and as you turn to about here, you hit your vent button, and everything's just going to swoosh right on out. Let off the vent button, lift your cassette up, make sure you drip it off a little, tilt it straight back up, and put your cap back on. Make sure it's tight, slide your spout back over, and now you can slide this back, open that up, dump some rinse water in here, make sure you close it, slide your cover back, shake this thing up pretty good, very carefully with not a lot of water. You don't want to break that float in there. And rinse it down and repeat the process of dumping 3 or 4 times, and that should clear this out pretty well. Now, like I said earlier, this is a brand new tank, so I don't need gloves, so we're going to be okay and safe here. And the reason I bought a brand new tank was because I found it very hard to find parts for these Thetford cassette toilets online. You may get lucky depending on the model you have, but it seems like they want you to go through an RV dealer to get parts, and I really don't want to do that. Most of these parts seem to be UK based, and I tried to get some stuff shipped from there, and it really wasn't worth it if I could get it shipped from there, because the shipping cost was probably more than some of these parts. So I found an entirely new whole cassette on Amazon, and it's a little ridiculous to spend $300 on a chunk of plastic, but I'm going to go over why here in a little bit. Number one, it was just easier to buy everything and have it as a backup than it is to search and find some of these parts, unless I'm not looking in the right place. If some of you know where to find parts for this thing, let me know. Alright, first we're going to go over some of the workings of this for those that don't know how this thing works. When this cassette is slid in, this valve or flapper or dump valve, whatever you want to call it here, slides into a track underneath your toilet. And on there is a mechanism that turns that. And that's your toilet handle turning that from above. And that opens up your flapper inside. I'll show you how that works. Closed, and now it's open. And closed again. And by the way, this thing is your cover over your toilet seal. When this goes in, the toilet seal cover gets pushed back on its track. And this is why you want to make sure that you dump whatever's in your toilet first before you go pulling this cassette out. Because anything in your toilet is sealed up against that. And if you go pull this out, everything that's in that toilet's going to go all over the place. This right here is a pressure release valve. You push it down and it releases air pressure out. Right here is your dump spout that can be swiveled. You do not want to go past this far, because when you get to this, it will unplug and come out of there. And that's channeled and grooved in the right direction to fit down in here, so it'll lock in. But to take that apart, that's how you do that. You come back all the way on this angle, just like playing with Legos. You kind of like find its spot, push it in, and turn it. So you definitely don't want to go beyond that right there. That's a safe zone. And you carefully push this thing back so you don't ruin a rubber seal. Now obviously that's your cap. It unscrews off. That also has a seal in it, and it is a measuring cup if you'd like to use that for your tank treatment. Your handle here, and I'm going to show you another piece you need to keep an eye on here. This little cover comes off. And underneath, you got a couple of screws here that you need to make sure they stay snug so this handle doesn't rip out on you and you end up having a catastrophic toilet event. And that just presses right into place like that. Some of them have this thing. I think that's to help pour chemicals in or something. I'm not sure. Our model on the tab does not have it. And by the way, this is a C400 style tank. If you have to order a new tank for our tabs, you make sure that you get the right hand side. Okay? This is where this valve is going to be. And how you figure out the right hand side is the direction you're sitting on that toilet will indicate what side tank you need. A right or a left. And most of our tabs, and probably the new Tab 360, it's going to be on the right. Because this comes in from the outside behind you on the right. That's a right side tank. But if you happen to order the wrong side, it's not entirely bad, because all these parts are made to be interchangeable to flip-flop them. And we'll get into that right now. So to open this thing up for cleaning or maintenance or parts replacement, you're going to slide this thing back about halfway, very carefully. And you're going to kind of twist this. There's going to be two markings. Got a little circle here and a double circle here. You need to move the pointer to the double circle to open it. And you just carefully twist. Sometimes this is tough to do, so just be careful. And you twist. and you carefully lift this out of here without breaking your float. We'll get into this in a second, but we're going to look down in this tank here. See if I can get some light down in here. So there are a few delicate pieces in here you need to pay attention to this tank. Let's see if I can get this. This little thing up in here in the back is your air release valve, and when I push down on it, you can see it's open. And you let up and it seals. Without that sealing, you're going to get poo water all over the place. And I'll show you on my original one where it broke, and that's one reason I bought a whole new cassette, just in case. But you got to be careful with that. The next piece you really got to be careful with is this float. And this is what tells your toilet light up top that it's half full and full. It floats in your poo, and these little magnets run along the side, and on the outside of this in the toilet there's sensors, and that's how I can tell if it's half full or full. On my original one, I lost the end cap right here, and now it doesn't really tell me much, which isn't a problem because you can literally just look down through the hole and see if it's full or not. But I like things to work, so I had to order a whole new one. This one's going to be for my original tank. Somehow I found this on eBay, and it ended up coming from the UK anyway. So this is like a $15 to $20 part, but the problem was the shipping was about 20 bucks itself also. Now I want to show you something here. I'm going to see if I can angle this right. This cap is already coming off the end of this brand new one. So let's open that up real quick. Let's see if you can see that. See that gap right there? That's already popping off. So you really got to pay attention to that. What I did with this one is I just ran some super glue around the edge of that. Hopefully it'll hold that on. And I'm going to have to do the same with this one. And then you push that cap back in and it should be snug. Now I'm not going to fully down Thetford on this because I think this design is absolutely amazing. But Thetford, you guys really need to beef up this plastic. This stuff is pretty cheap and chintzy, man. I know it needs to be flexible, but things like these little hinges in here that just snap in, this stuff really needs to be beefed up, guys. When this gets shaken around in there and stuff, if you're driving and moving, it'll end up cracking this thing right off. The same goes with this plastic piece here that kind of is just a retention piece to hold your valve slide on. That could be beefed up a little bit. Also, this little valve here needs to be beefed up, and I'm going to put a picture of that up. So the air release valve I had in the original just popped off. There's a spring under here, and there's that rubber seal underneath. I ended up fixing it on my own by tapering this and putting a very tiny screw down through it and the rubber seal on the bottom at the right size that the threads on the tiny screw I used hold it together. So that little plastic push pin that holds this together, Thetford, that really should be fixed because that could be pretty detrimental. If you're lifting this up and this thing was broken and popped off and you didn't know and you were shaking it about, you'd have all your waste all over the place. But other than that, I like this system and I think the design is great. Okay, so to give everybody an idea how this thing works, I'm going to try to do it this way. When you take your cassette toilet and you slide it in, the cap's going to hit right there. And it slides in. And as it slides in, your dump valve, the toilet valve, slides into its own track down in the back. And that opens the cassette and it allows the mechanism to be turned. As you pull the cassette out, it automatically closes your lid and you slide it straight back out. Underneath your cassette, you're going to have this thing down here, and this pushes in and out, When that cassette gets slid in, it hits back in here and it opens up that pressure relief area. And that just allows the cassette to not build pressure. It goes up and through a special airway, and it comes down and out the bottom of the trailer or wherever it goes to vent any pressure or gases out of your tank. And here's that pressure release valve that I fixed with the screw, and it seems to be working just fine. Now when it comes to putting your lid back in, you're going to find your arrow on here, and you just slide in your float, and this is channeled in a way that it can only really go in a certain way here, this way or this way. But what you need to do is line up your arrow right around there. It drops in. Use this about halfway to get some leverage, and you twist the whole dump slide valve mechanism back closed, and you're good to go. The next thing that you want to keep an eye on is this little compartment back here. That's your tank vent right here. That piece that I showed you earlier underneath pushes up and it rocks that forward. The cassette can vent its smell out here, down there, and out the bottom of the trailer. But you want to keep an eye on this valve here. Make sure these parts haven't come off or broke. And you just replace your cap like so. There are two little points here that you got to push in. I just used a little knife to pop that out, and you push it back down. Okay, now we're going to go over a couple of the ways I've been keeping all these seals lubed and free of drying and cracking and shrinking, especially out here in the desert where it's extremely dry. When it comes to the toilet valve here, this is all rubber, I think. So I've been using Thetford's toilet seal lubricant and conditioner in here. And what you do is you pour just enough of it to come up to the top edge right here, and then you just leave it. Let that sit as long as you can. At least 8 hours, I think it says, or a couple days. Longer the better. And that's going to keep this seal moisturized and lubed. That way, this thing meets and seals to the bottom of your toilet. And it also helps this dump valve here glide very smooth. I've also been using this for any of the other O-rings and seals in this tank. And in the spout is an important one. You need to lube this up. So you can take a little of that on your fingers, of course with some gloves, put it on there, and keep that lubed so this thing can turn nice and easy. The next big main seal you need to make sure is lubed is the one that's underneath this slide dump mechanism. And that is going to be this guy all around the edge here. You want to make sure that stays nice and lubed so you can twist this in and out for cleaning and maintenance. I'll also take a little of that, just a little bit, and I'll pour it on that little valve that seats inside the tank. Same thing with a little bit on that. That way all these seals stay nice and lubed and soft. The other thing I recently picked up was some of this silicone plumber's grease here. It's food grade, and it's for O-rings, gaskets, and valves. Now, this in theory should work better than this, although this has been working pretty good, but this should hold up better. Now, the rule with all these seals and O-rings is you do not use petroleum-based products. No WD-40. Stop using WD-40 on a lot of things. WD-40 is not a lubricant, it's a solvent, okay? WD-40 works great on cleaning things or getting rid of stickers on paint and things like that. But solvents will gum up and deteriorate rubber real fast. So you want something food grade. I've even heard of people using olive oil on these seals. Now, olive oil won't last long, of course, and it's not that water resistant. That's where this comes in. or even a silicone spray. I think Thetford even makes a silicone spray for seals, and that would be just fine, I think. Now when it comes to cleaning this thing, it starts with tank treatment, okay? I throw my tank pods in when I'm in use. It gets dumped, and then I rinse this thing out with about this much water in here. You don't need it filled up. Shake it all about. You rinse this thing out about 3-4 times, and if you want, you can put a little soap in there in the last rinse. But usually soaps and anything like that, bleach or anything like that's not going to be good for your enzymes later on, so you don't want to do that all the time. It'll kill your good bacteria to eat up all your nasty stuff in there. Typically after I dump, after using this thing, I'll put a little water in the bottom in here. I'll put some more tank treatment in it, and I'll let that sit in there. When I get home, I'll fill this thing almost to the top with the tank treatment in it, and I'll let it sit a couple days. That way the tank treatment can eat up whatever else is in here. Now at home, after that, you can technically just go to your toilet in the house and dump this thing and flush it. If you have a clean out that runs into your septic tank or sewer, you could do it that way too, I think. But after that's done, when I want to do a deep clean on this, which is about every 2 months typically, because I use my trailer every couple weeks, you're going to want to take this apart. Like I just showed you earlier, pull your slide cover back, carefully twist this thing, and you carefully lift it out. And we're not really going to clean it here. You're going to have to use your imagination on this. But first things first, you need to come in here and check all this stuff out. Make sure your screws are snug, don't over tighten them, and everything's in place. If you want to take this apart, you can, but I'm telling you, this is a lot of parts. You will have to do that to replace your toilet seal eventually, but the way I do it is take a picture with your camera. That way you know where everything goes when you put it back together. A lot of this, if you don't rinse out your cassette really well, will get some buildup on the insides of this. All in here and around here. Sometimes you'll get it up in there. What I like to do is I buy some cheap plastic brushes or dishwashing brushes, and I'll come in here and I'll run that through there, break all this stuff up. Of course I have a garbage bag down on the ground when I do this and gloves on, maybe even some glasses. And I just use soap and water inside and out of this. That's all I've been using is soap and water. You need to get in here and wipe all these surfaces off and at least make sure there's no gunk buildup. Same with this thing. That can come off very carefully if you squeeze it, but remember which way it goes. So after you clean that off, use your silicone seal lubricant, maybe even olive oil, or that Thetford toilet seal conditioner. I'll pull the dump nozzle off here. I'll condition my seal here, make sure everything's clean. I'll even add a little seal conditioner to the cap inside. I'll usually go to Walmart or something, or a dollar store, and I'll buy a really cheap toilet brush. And I'll come in here with some soap and water, and I'll use a toilet brush and scrub the walls down. Do not use anything metal on plastic. You don't want to score this. You want it to be as smooth as possible for as long as you can. That way anything that's in here, you know, washes out and slides off. But you're going to really have to try to get back up under here in some of these areas and clean that off too. You may have to do that with a rag. Make sure you wear really long gloves. That's a pro tip on that one. It can get pretty gross. After I scrub it all down, I give this thing another rinse, dump it down the toilet or into the septic, and you're pretty much good to go and use it again. But if you're gonna store it, I would say let it air out. And then after it's aired out, make sure all your seals are lubed, put it back together. But for me, I'm constantly using it, so it's just a clean out, wash out. I throw more tank treatment right in this thing. And I typically use a pod when I do that. When I put the treatment in here, I'll let water come up to about this line on these, and then I'll throw a pod or two in there, depending on the heat outside, just to keep the smell down, really. Breakdown's not a huge problem with this little thing. You got this big old spout, and if something got clogged, you could literally just pull it out if you had to. And that's about all there is to it as far as cleaning this thing goes. Now, like I said, every time I dump or I clean this thing, I keep a whole bottle of Lysol disinfectant wipes in the trailer, and I'll just come through and wipe down this whole thing on the outside. That way, if I have to pull this thing out or do anything with it, I know that the whole exterior of this is going to be fairly sanitized and clean, probably spotless. But some other things to note with this, kind of obvious. You got a handle that pulls out so you can wheel this thing around like a poop suitcase, and it just kind of goes in and snaps back into its spot. I'm not sure what that's supposed to go to, maybe on a different model, but that just came with the extra one, so ignore that for the tab people out there. A couple things I do want to add is, if you're only going number 1 in this thing, you're going to need to mix a good amount of water in there, because urine will build up like a calcium scale in here, and it's pretty hard to clean off, even with a tank treatment. The only way to do that is water. Dilution is the only solution for pollution. Remember that. Now, if you're going to use this for number 1 and number 2, I recommend dumping this often if you can. Don't let it get past half because it gets pretty heavy. Someone did state that if you only went number 2 and you left out number 1, that it would smell a lot less, and they're probably correct on that, because I think it's due to the ammonia in pee that really brings up the smell of this thing, if it's open while your vent's drawing pressure out of the tank anyway. Typically, this will last me 3 days of full use, number 1 and number 2. Being pretty moderate with my flushing anyway. If you're off-grid and boondocking, well, this isn't going to last you very long, so you're going to need to really pick and choose how much you need to use this, maybe for those middle-of-the-night emergencies only. As far as toilet paper in this thing goes, I've used everything. It doesn't matter. Anything more than a day sitting up, the enzymes in there and everything else will eat it all up. Plus, you're not going to really plug this thing, and if you do, you can shake it back and dump it out. That's the beauty of having a tiny tank and not a big holding tank where you have to flush it out. I will say, just for experimental reasons, I added a piece of paper towel in here to see how well my enzymes break things down. And I'll tell you what, those paper towels, they do not break down. They will plug things up. So don't throw paper towels in your septic system or your cassette tank or your black tank. I did have one person comment and say something like, is this system supposed to be easier than just going to the pit house, campground bathroom? Well, no, because this takes a little more work when it comes to cleanup and usage, but what this has allowed me to do is camp farther from a bathroom, get into those campsites that maybe nobody wants because they don't want to have to walk 5-10 minutes to a bathroom house. Also, I bought a trailer with a bathroom so I could use it. And I'll tell you what, it's really nice to not have to get up in the middle of the night, crawl out of a tent or out of this trailer, turn on my headlamp, flash my lights all around camp in the middle of the night while I head to a freezing cold bathroom house. Most importantly, I really don't miss those early mornings of running down to the pit house while I had to hold my breath for 5 minutes because the ammonia smell in there was so bad it'd be burning my nostrils and eyes, while I got about 10,000 flies trying to fly up and tickle my backside and land on my face. I definitely don't miss that. And if you've ever been to Arizona and used a pit house when it's hot out, let me tell you what, it is brutal. I'd rather use my own bathroom. So yeah, I would say the cassette system works out pretty good. Now some people like the composting stuff, and everybody's got their style. I think if this thing ever craps out on me and I can't get parts, I'll just rip that thing out and maybe put in a composting toilet eventually. I don't know. But overall, I'm pretty happy with this system. As far as coming from tent camping goes, this is amazing. I mean, yeah, it's a little gross, takes a little work, but it's not really that bad to me anyway. I think it's obviously worth the effort it takes to keep this thing going, to be able to have the luxury of a bathroom in a tiny trailer like this. Well, I think I've talked enough about the old crapper tank here, so I just want to say I'm no expert when it comes to any of this. If anybody has any good constructive comments to leave on maybe some tips or ways they use their cassette, that would always be helpful for me or anybody else out there that may not know. So hopefully any advice I could give may help somebody else out there when it comes to this. At the very least, it's one more informational video about a Thetford cassette toilet that wasn't there before. Well, I think I've talked enough crap for today, so I think I'm going to end that video here. Next week I will be heading out once again on a camping adventure. I'll be going to a new spot in the desert, so that should be pretty cool. And as usual, I'll be making a video of that and I will post it up here. Thank you all again for your wonderful comments and your many likes. That is much appreciated. See you in a week.